Many of you listening to me now may be half listening to me and half working at home, because working from home has become the norm for so many employees since last March. The restrictions, though, with vaccine rollout will ease, and the question is how many will return to the office either full-time or part-time. To talk about the future of the workplace now, I'm joined on the line by Peter Cosgrove, Managing Director of FutureWise. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, you've got a curious definition of remote working. You say many of us are not actually doing that. Explain.
Yeah, well, I think we're remote working in terms of we're not working in the office, but it's not actually what remote work is. So anyone who did remote work before this pandemic happened, they worked from home, but actually there was lots of things they could do. At the moment, we're kind of prisoners at home. We're essentially told as much as possible, don't leave your home. When we do, we can't go out for lunch. We can't really go for coffee. We're not really meant to meet people or see people. So the reality is working from home is a lot more isolating at the moment. So a lot of people are seeing this as remote working, whereas actually this is the worst case of remote working, whereas generally, what remote work should be is, yes, you're not working in the office, but it doesn't mean you always have to be stuck at home and that's the only place you can work.
Yeah, and that is the issue, that when you're at home, there are many distractions and things that need to be done. I mean, if you're in your little office at home or up in a bedroom working and you hear a scream of a child, work stops. And you hightail it to deal with the crisis, which turns out to be nothing at all, of course, but still.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate when people are home from school. So again, post-pandemic, everybody goes back to school, goes back to college. You'll have a office or a place at home, and even if it ends up being a kitchen table, the reality is you'll be the only person there, so you'll actually have peace. Whereas at the moment, as you said, there's just too much going on. And there's also, on top of that, there's constant stress and anxiety around lots of other things. So I think the first thing people need to realize is if you're isolated and you're feeling quite lonely and feeling kind of very much alone at work, this is what a lot of us are feeling, but that is not what it will be like when we do eventually get back into the workforce and workplace.
Now, talk to me about how you see the future of the office, where its place will be. Will it be a smaller place, or will it be just as large with plenty of room for social distancing in case of, infections and all the rest of it? Will it be blended working, some days at home, some days in an office space?
Yeah, well, so the first thing is, in the short term, there won't be much cost savings for companies who think they'll move everyone from home, and that will happen, but there's obviously lease issues. And secondly, if you do have a workplace, there could be a lot of work you might have to do on air conditioning and distancing, as you said, and desks having to be further apart. So there's kind of an interim step here for the next year, and that's probably going to cost companies a bit. And that's why a lot of them are still telling people that we prefer you to stay at home. I think the reality is, if you think about a lot of workforces, people come to work and they sit at a desk beside 20 other people, and there's open plan. So what does everybody do? They put on their headphones because they don't want to be disturbed, because many people have realized that this open plan office does not work well for certain types of work. It works really well for collaboration, for chatting to people, for coming up with ideas. And what we're going to think about with the office is not as much what the office itself is going to look like, but what work are people doing and where is the best place to do that work. So some people definitely need to be in the office. They need to actually be talking to other people constantly and organizing. Other people, if you're, let's say, working on an IT project and maybe you're coding for 6 hours, the reality is not only could you do that at home, you could also do that at midnight to late in the morning. So the second thing people are going to start thinking about is this term called asynchronous. At the moment, everybody works synchronously, which means we all seem to start work around 8:30 and we all finish around 6 in many office environments. Whereas actually, there's a lot to be said that doesn't actually have to happen if we don't have to constantly be on the same calendar as someone else. And that's then going to open up all these possibilities that we could have this 24/7 workforce, whereas we don't actually have to stop when the sun goes down because we can just move somewhere else where the sun is just coming up. And I think these are the sort of questions people are asking themselves. So the last thing I'll say is when people start saying things like it's going to be 3 days from home or 2 days from the office, what I would say is in the short term, don't make any strong plans around that. Pilot things, try things, because what will happen is in the first 3 months, everybody will go back to the workforce because everybody's just sick and tired of being at home, so they'll want to go back. But 6 months in, people will start to go back to some sort of a happy medium.
Yeah. One of our Newstalk listeners, Jerry in Rathdrum in Wicklow, says, working from home is not all it's cracked up to be. It was great last summer having my family around and working without having to commute or dress up for the office. But I'm cracking up. I crave more adult company, better broadband and lower heating electricity bills as I'm here all the time. I can't wait to drive up the M11 again to job sanity. A lot of people might echo that feeling.
And that's the thing. But I mean, part of that is change. I mean, he might have forgotten 2 years ago when he was sitting in traffic for an hour and a half one day that he would have loved to work from home. And this is the point. It's for me, this whole new world is about flexibility, not really about remote work. I love the idea that people just don't all have to be on the M50 at 8 in the morning. Some people can say, I will go into work today, but I'm going to work at home till about 10:30, get a lot of things done. Maybe some of the stuff that I just do first thing in the office, like clear emails, just get that out of the way, and then I'll leave at 10, and it'll take me 20 minutes to get in, not an hour and 10 minutes, and then I'll be in the workplace for 6 hours, and then I'll come home, or maybe I'll get the kids to school, pick them up, and then I'll work in the evening. The point is, what companies are really trying to do, if they're doing this properly, is saying, we're going to trust you. And that's going to be the big word of the future, this idea of trust, because companies are going two ways. One, are saying we need more surveillance, we need to check where people are, we need to check up on them. And some of them are dressing this up as productivity tools. Oh, no, we're not checking on people, we just want to check people being productive. Whereas the reality is any sort of those tools just completely demotivates your staff. So the big factor of the future will not be about these fancy offices and free food, even though they're quite nice. It'll be much more about working in an office where you feel trusted, and that's going to be the real currency when people go back to work.
Well, Peter, I'll read some of the comments from our Newstalk listeners. I'm working from home going on a year now. My husband is home for a week's holidays from his work. He's driving me mad. Under my feet. I'm well able to manage the homeschooling, no problem, but not my husband. And that's signed by Amy. And if Amy, if that's your real name, you're in trouble. I'm living to go back, says Mick in Galway. I do so many extra hours from home. It's very hard when there are two of us trying to work from the house. And another question, really, Peter, you might be able to answer it. Can your employer force you to come back into work once you're vaccinated? I prefer to stay at home. I'm much more productive here and don't miss that mental commute.
That's an interesting one, and it's one companies are grappling with at the moment, because there's a real challenge that it's very difficult to force somebody to go back if there's a health issue there. And there's two sorts of health issues. There's the basic health issue about people not wanting to get COVID, and then there's people you hear who've got much more underlying symptoms and would be at much bigger risk. So companies are working through these things. What I would say, though, is that's a little different to somebody saying, I just feel more productive at home. If that's the case, you just need to prove it. And the point is, productivity is not everything. There's a lot of things that happen in the workplace that we don't actually measure. So, graduate programs, when graduates come into the office or interns come into the office, you need somebody to manage them and support them and show them the way. You don't actually get a lot of brownie points for doing that, but actually it takes a lot of time out of your day, and often it ends up being the same people. So there are things that happen in offices, those casual conversations around the water cooler, bumping into someone on the stairs, and that gives you an idea about something. So lots of things do happen in the office. So I think you have to be a bit careful about saying you only work well at home. I definitely think it should be that hybrid. I do think the other person who talked about longer hours, that is a big, big issue at the moment. Firstly, because we're in lockdown, so we're not allowed to do very much else, and that means we're on more. But as I've said before to you, Pat, I think this is really our own challenge, not our company's challenge. Most organizations I talk to aren't actually forcing people to work longer hours. It's just the case that we're sitting watching Netflix or something. We still have email in our pocket because it's on our phone. And the moment there's a break or our partner goes out to get a cup of tea, we just flick on our phone and suddenly we're back in the world of work and we're answering something. So we're going to have to be much more diligent about how we separate work and home. And I would tell anyone who is working from home that at the end of your workday, you almost have to have a routine where you close down the laptop. Any work files need to be out of eye distance so you don't see them, because the moment you see work, when you're back at home, you're back in work. And the key word people are using is this word, decompression, whereas we used to leave work and people didn't realize, even if you were sitting in a car in traffic or on the train, you actually got 30 minutes or 45 minutes to just kind of be and kind of reflect on the day, even if you didn't feel that, and then you came back home. Whereas now work ends, and 2 seconds later, you might have a toddler jumping on top of you or people asking you for a lift somewhere, so you don't get that time. And people kind of do need that slight barrier between work and home, and I think that's what a lot of people are really feeling at the moment.
All right, Peter, look, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation. Peter Cosgrove, Managing Director of Future Wise.